Welcome to this latest edition of the Cranky Curmudgeon's Corner. My name is Paul Thomas. After an extended text conversation with my neighbor across the street who spends a lot of time across the pond, I thought it might be an appropriate time to start looking at some of our current issues and situations through a philosophical lens. So this episode will be devoted to that, by recalling some of the philosophers I see as prominent influencers, as well as some anthropological tendencies we have been embracing during our time as the dominant species on the planet. So joining our philosophical investigations are Raquel Winnica and Doug Heinrichs. Welcome, panel.
Thank you. Good to
So
be here.
great to have you two along board with this. So let's start with the ancient Greeks. In particular, the guy we model this podcast after, Socrates, whose standard method for finding the truth was to keep asking questions. Every answer from a previous question prompted another question, which required further clarification to the point they were trying to make. That is the reason we employ the Socratic method. But that's not what I want to examine. Socrates is also credited with the phrase, knowledge is virtue. I get printer problems here, folks, so bear with me. Which could be interpreted as the smarter you are, the better person you are becoming. My first exposure to the phrase, knowledge is virtue, in high school led me to think that that's pretty cool, especially if he's right. The more education producing a virtuous population means a quality society, right? However, as I became more acquainted with the real world, I saw that people who looked to be very smart could also be very bad. Looking for the ingredient that would corrupt the smart person into becoming a bad one, I concluded that the lust for power is the thing that would motivate many to give up virtue and principle in order to achieve and maintain power. So, perfect example I have for this is Todd Blanche. Smart dude, but a very bad man. So what do you say to Socrates? Knowledge can't be connected to virtue because power motivates us more than anything else. Doug, what's happening here?
Well, I think, Socrates' view of the matter that a person doesn't ever knowingly do evil, do bad. That didn't last very long, but even Plato rejected that and had the notion of a tripartite soul where rationality and reason was one part, but emotions and desires were there, and reason often lost out in those battles. Same with Aristotle, who also felt that often that behavior was determined not by knowledge or rationality, but by emotions and desires. So I think that went pretty fast. And I think over time, there's been more and more the view that human behavior is largely determined by one's desires and one's emotional position. Now, power being one of the things, but not the only emotion that might drive a person to do a bad thing. I think the power review certainly came very prominent in somebody like Thomas Hobbes, who basically felt that everybody was after power, basically to stay safe. Thomas Hobbes had the view that human beings left to their own devices would just kill each other off as individuals. That in a state of nature, human life was, as in his famous phrase, was solitary, poor, brutish, nasty, and short. And that was his view, and that he actually felt people gave over power to a sovereign just because they needed the protection. But I think, and of course, the other big person who pushed power was Nietzsche with his will to power. But the notion that our emotions are what guide us The other person who I think articulated that beautifully, one of my favorite philosophers, is David Hume, who took the position that not only do our emotions determine our judgments, but reason simply we use to justify and support our emotional responses. His famous phrase being that reason is and ought to be the slave of the passions. It's just there to serve our emotional instincts. So I think the notion, it's kind of a very, Socrates, it was a very idealistic view to think that rationality would dictate human behavior.
Well, the goodness part of behavior.
Yeah. But I think that's simply not the case. And as you point out, there are a tremendous number of very rational, bright people who are anything but good. So I think that's not where morality is rooted. It's not rooted in our intellect primarily. Our intellect can refine it a little bit, but it's the inculcation of decent values that starts from childhood on. That's why Aristotle says you shouldn't study philosophy or you shouldn't study ethics until you're 40 years old, because you don't have the experience to understand it. So I think Socrates was simply wrong about that.
Socrates simply wrong, Raquel. I look at two individuals. I look at Barack Obama and I look at Donald Trump. And Barack Obama, I consider a very bright, very smart, very highly intelligent man. He's a good man, okay? Donald Trump is a knucklehead, and he's a very bad man. So was Socrates totally wrong, as Doug suggests, or can we look at intelligence as maybe a pathway to being a good person?
I will speak as a woman that lives in the contemporary times,
Okay.
and the way I understand these philosophers. I am not a philosopher, neither I did study. However, as an artist, I look into many of them just to get more depth in what I do and the understanding of the world, which is basically what I need to do the best in order to put out my views and my creations. Saying this, I believe that we cannot take Socrates away from the context in which he elaborated his views, which is pretty much, centuries ago from
a long time ago.
right now. So we cannot as much as he is a classic and we continue to see him, he didn't see us. and where we are now with all of this time that has passed, and the good and the bad that passed, and the analysis that we are capable of doing nowadays. So I don't think he was wrong. Also, I believe that when he talked about virtue and knowledge, it also encompassed the understanding of who we are as human beings. How do we just not only understand knowledge as the rationale of the things that we read, and that we become more out there talking about topics, but it was about, in those contexts, and that I think that speaks to us today. How are we capable of, beyond grabbing books, we are able to make a deep analysis and be judgmental about our own thoughts and our own way of seeing ourselves? Like Etty Hillesum, as you know, that I study, this amazing woman. It's not just about being knowledgeable and being able to talk about amazing topics like going to Harvard. It's about what we do. What do we do with that? And how do we see the other person? How do we bring knowledge outside? And that is, for me, the difference between Barack Obama and Donald Trump. So we have both men with the capacity of knowledge, and how do they use it was quite different, I believe. And also the sensitive and the sensible aspect of knowledge and or the heart, we cannot leave that out at all, ever. And I think that Socrates was trying to say that, but it came to us now like one just knowledge. I don't.
Yeah, well, he
believe
didn't write anything down. Plato wrote everything down. So we got to go on what Plato wrote down.
Right.
Okay. Swinging over to anthropology. I am firmly convinced that most behaviors can be explained by the status in group hierarchy as to whether they are satisfied with their ranking or not satisfied, and therefore willing to actively work on disrupting the status quo for the purpose of achieving a higher ranking. Please explain why this theory is incorrect. Raquel, you recently put together Under the Third Sky, okay, which was a beautiful concert that was I saw down at the Presbyterian Church down in Pittsburgh, and I was just amazed at the way the three participants, you, Lenny, and the piano player, I can't think of his name, came together under your leadership and inspiration and research and put together this wonderful piece of art. But it was clear to me that you were the one who did it, and it was Lenny and your piano player buddy who were willing to accept that leadership completely, that made the thing work. There was no, oh, I got to be the boss now. You were the boss, and and they accepted that. And it's my belief that groups that are successful agree that there is an alpha that does this, and that the ones who are in that group either agree that that alpha should be in charge, or they don't, and then they start trouble. The example that I'm citing, which was your Under the Third Sky, was one where there was complete consensus that your inspiration, your work was the one that they were going to follow. And so that's my belief, is the way the world works, that we have these hierarchies, and the people who are in these hierarchies, whether they're way up in the hierarchy or down at the bottom, either agree that this is the way it's going to work, or they disagree and they start stuff up. So what do you say about that?
Yeah, I mean, well, thank you about my project Under the Same Sky, because
Under the Same Sky, yes.
No, that I say that because it comes from a phrase by Eddie Hillesum, so I need to be very respectful. I mean, I do believe that I can only go for what I think, which is the closest, right? I am not a leader of big groups of people, only like big groups at the university, and that is pretty much my leadership, having a bunch of students under my leadership and creating things with them. And I think that then translates to different groups, more and more, and bigger. I want to believe that a good understanding, and also different systems work differently. Once again, I will go back to my world, which is my first world was opera. Pretty much in opera, it's a very vertical system. You have the stage director or the director, and then everything underneath it. Now I am in artistic creation, because I do believe that we have to have good leadership, but also there has to be an element of horizontality in the saying and in how we build the ideas. And I do believe in a system that is more plural. However, I do think that when you have a leader that is capable of criticizing its own ways, and then bring that and model, then the relationship that can be built is different. And I will say, and I will just bring an example very clear. Now living in Cuenca, I decided that I wanted to be a volunteer at the hospital. So there is a protocol between the university where I am doing my Erasmus and the hospital here in Cuenca. So I am working for the Association for Cancer, and I go there twice a week to counsel and to accompany the patients while they receive their treatment.
Mm-hmm.
But I am always putting in pairs with other volunteers. So I did have one leader that came with me once, and whatever I did for her was wrong. But let's say that where I put the table, where those little things that doesn't make to the act of actually being there, making a community with the patient. So everything was like so controlled that it took away my desire of continuing to go. Another time, I had this woman that just let me be. And she was observing my work, not from the place of control, but trust. And also bringing something that I think that today we are losing, which is the common sense, is the trust of the common sense. Like, I can see that she can go and talk, that she brings her heart out. That doesn't matter if the cloth is placed vertical or horizontal. That is minor. So going back to the leadership and the groups, I think that there is a knowledge of the person that leads, but there is a trust within the group, even though that person is there, is not the center of the universe, and the rest are not put down. It's a constant collaboration of knowledge.
Okay, let me ask you this. The person that you were in with that was very controlling, do you think she was threatened by your competence and the respect that the patients were showing you, while the person who had that trust felt very comfortable and not threatened by you at all? Do you think that played into it at all?
Maybe a tiny bit. I also think that for some reason, and going back to one of the main topics that you brought up, is that this sense of we have to have power.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't know if she was threatened, but perhaps within that somewhere there was a feeling of losing her own power, which had nothing to do, because that is what I feel that the good leadership does. It brings power to the others,
Mm-hmm.
because you don't lose anything, you gain. No
Right.
matter what, you gain. The patient gains, the institution gains, you do gain as a human being. And then also I see her as a wow, what a character, what a great leadership. There is a recognition from the ones that are beneath, in a way, in that pyramid, but there is also a sense of equality.
Yeah. Doug,
The morale is equal.
yeah, right.
The morale is equal.
Raquel brings up a great point, Doug, and that is whenever the leader shares the power, the group itself becomes more powerful, more effective. And you and I have been talking about this for a long time.
Yeah. And I think to me, the other piece of this is that I think the kind of person seeking power and how they seek power has a lot to do with the personality traits of the individual. So there are people who will take power when it serves the mission that they're interested in achieving. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And they're inclined to share power, they're inclined to be flexible. But then there are people who seek power for the sake of power. And the problem, and to me, this is the largest political problem, no matter what system of government you have. The bigger the organization gets, the more work it takes to become the recognized leader. And the kind of person who is willing to put that work in to be the leader is usually a power hungry, narcissistic individual. Otherwise, why would you do it? I mean, look what it takes to become a national politician in this country. You have to sell your soul for years and years and years, and your whole life is devoted to getting there, right? What normal, reasonable human being would want to do that, right? It's very different than being elected to something locally. I have a summer home on a small island in Maine, and they have a selectmen. So somebody, we'll pick 6 guys this year from the community, guys and gals, and you get very good people because nobody has to work to get those positions. Their friends and neighbors think they're reasonable people and put them in. But if you're trying to be a senator or a president of the United States, you've got to devote your life to acquiring that power. And you're sacrificing so much else, so many other values. What kind of person would want to do that? And I think it doesn't matter what your political system, once the organization gets big enough, you have the problem that the people who get power and seek power are the last people you wish would have it. That, I think, is the problem.
But it is also can be on a very small scale, like the example that Raquel gave us.
Absolutely.
There are only 2 people. Yeah. There are only 2 people, but that control lady, she wanted to make sure that
absolutely. Yeah. There are people who operate even on a small scale that way. But as you get into bigger organizations, the reasonable people tend to drop out. And what you're left with are power-seeking, narcissistic individuals who want power. And I think, we all can look at Donald Trump as kind of the paradigm of that. But I look at Joe Biden. Here's a guy who spent his life wanting to be president.
Yeah.
He finally gets there. He runs saying he is not going to run for a second term because he's just there to stop Trump. He can't let go.
Right.
Even though it was bad for the country, bad for all of us, he can't let go. He spent his life getting there. He's not walking away.
Yeah. And he thought he was doing it for the country, but
he told himself that.
He told himself that, right?
Yeah. It's rationalization. He was doing it for Joe Biden.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, and it happens a lot in Argentina, Latin America and South America, one of the biggest problems that we have is corruption. Because once you get in power, it's impossible. So that's why it's so polarized. Like some very knowledgeable young people that could be running, could be going for things, they say, no, politics, no, because then that is where the corrupts go.
It's a dirty business.
It starts.
There's that famous thing of, power corrupts and absolute power corrupts, absolutely. But I heard a great twist on it recently. I forget who said it, that power attracts corrupt people. Mm-hmm. And I think there's as much truth in that as the other way, that the kind of person who's drawn to those positions are corruptible people by nature. They're the people who are in it for their selfish reasons, for their self-aggrandizement, for their ego.
Well, you look at the Trump administration and the Republican Party, and it's that proves your statement right there.
Yeah.
Georg Hegel developed a form of philosophical methodology known as the dialectic, which posits certain themes, beliefs, assumptions he called a thesis, against its opposite given the logical label antithesis or antithesis. Hegel believed that the interaction between thesis and antithesis would produce something superior, a synthesis. The beauty of dialectical reasoning is that the process is continuous because the synthesis achieved from the first interaction becomes a brand new thesis, which automatically goes against its own antithesis, producing another synthesis. It sort of follows the Socratic method of truth searching by always asking the next question. So, by definition, the process can never reach perfection, but each successive synthesis is an improvement of what we had before. Is this not a practical method to try to look at ways to make things better? Doug, I look at nature and I see a man and the opposite is a woman, and the interaction between the man and the woman produces the offspring, which is the synthesis. So I'm seeing it in nature, and I'm not talking about just people and mammals. This is all the way into the insect world. They have that, males and females, the birds and everything. So is this not a kind of reasonable way to look at things?
Well, I think it's reasonable in a sense that you can see that process, but I think there are two caveats I think are important. One is Hegel not only said that there's going to be an antithesis. His belief was the antithesis was embedded in the synthesis, that any position has a self-destructive element in it. Mm-hmm. And that comes to fruition, and then it has to go somewhere. And so some adjustment happens, and that becomes your synthesis. Now, the other thing, though, is I think Hegel believed that this was a path to progress. And he believed that because he was a philosophical, objective idealist who believed that, everything in the world was just the world spirit seeking self-consciousness and perfection. Mm-hmm. That's a big assumption that I think most of us would not jump on. So if you take that assumption away, even if this dialectic between synthesis and antithesis and so forth happens, there's no reason to think it's going to lead to progress. It just leads to change. It could devolve. Something could come out worse because of the inner conflict within something. What's happening to, capitalism. It's a self-destructive system ultimately, but it's not necessarily going to lead to something better. Maybe, hope so, but it wouldn't have to. So while I think it's a useful way, I think his insight that there's always embedded in everything the seeds of its own destruction is very true, and it bears paying attention to. I think his optimistic assumption that it's all going to lead to progress, I think that's a big stretch.
Well, I'm not sure if that is. You could say that it could lead. It could be worse. Things could be worse, but they also could be better.
Right. You don't know.
You don't know.
You don't know where it's sort of like evolution. Doesn't necessarily mean species are going to get better. They could devolve into different ways. It's a crapshoot.
Yeah. When the whales were the land animals and they went into the sea, who thought they would become way bigger than the dinosaurs, which the blue whale is, Is that necessarily a good thing? That blue whale has to eat a lot of protein to stay big. Not necessarily a good thing. Okay, right. Raquel, I don't know how much you got into what we talked about with Hegel here, but do you see anything good about what he said with this dialectical method?
As Doug says, it is embedded in everything, and everything we also do. And I think it's important. And once again, I do agree with you both. Like, the outcome doesn't need to be better or worse. It's just an outcome. It's just another way of manifesting. I do believe that continuing to ask questions, it's important, because that will make us evaluate and never stop. So once again, I'll bring it to my world and the world of theater. First of all, we always need a thesis and an antithesis, or an antagonistic way of seeing a character, right? Otherwise, I couldn't play a Don Giovanni any longer. So, or even a Violetta Valerie, right? It's not just the victim. There are always so many ways to we have a fact, and we need to see what is against that fact in order to grow and enter a character. Otherwise, it's mediocre. So you
have to find a good and a bad in your character.
Yeah, because everything in itself has a good and a bad. uh, everyone potentially, and that is one of the things I tell my students, especially now that everything is so careful, and no one wants to enter certain characters because they are one way or another. We have become so, how to say, it's so difficult and everything is so polarized, right? And it's like we all have a potential to be a Don Giovanni. We all have a potential to do something bad and dramatically bad. We choose not to for many reasons. So therefore, I think that we live in the grace, and the grace is this synthesis in a way, or this new element that comes from both things. So once again, I believe that for a good production to be good, you need to constantly ask questions about what you are doing. And I will say, is this gesture or this gesture better for that particular night? So we can never stop thinking what can be better. And Etty Hillesum, she says, she thinks in the synthesis, right? Just being in Camp Westerbork, about to be deported to Auschwitz, trying to see the beauty in every human being and understanding the bad that we many times Jewish people have against so and so in that moment the Germans. So I would like to live like the lilies in the fields. If we were able to really look at them and understand them, we will be able to live like them. But unfortunately, we don't. We become so complicated and so full with so many things that we forget that is also the synthesis that sometimes brings the stop for a better look. That's what I think.
Okay. Hegel's most famous disciple was another German philosopher, Karl Marx, who used the dialectic to describe the economics of the time, which had the owners of factories and plantations getting rich off the labor of their exploited employees and slaves. The representation of this system was called capitalism. Marx posited as an initial thesis this capitalism, with the antithesis being the violent overthrow by the owners by the workers, creating a synthetic result of the workers in charge and benefiting from ownership of, he called, the means of production. While some of the antithetical manifestations emerged with the birth and growth of the Union movement and the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia, Marx's hopes for a workers' paradise clearly did not come to fruition. While some advancements were recorded, such as the 40-hour work week and universal health care in some countries, unfortunately not here in America, capitalism still remains the dominant force in global economics. The closest example I have observed as a reasonable synthesis of the dialectical interaction of workers versus owners is Norway, whose citizens enjoy many benefits that fall under the label of socialism. In many other places, the wealth gap has grown so both billionaires coexist along with folks with food insecurity. Do you see a future where the planet's wealth is shared to the extent where millions don't have to worry about the next meal being available? Raquel, do you think that we can get a world where everybody has something to eat when they're hungry?
I will say something that perhaps will make you eject my chair right now. It's like, as long as we all perished tomorrow and the whole thing becomes from scratch, perhaps. I think, but now leaving that comment aside, that sometimes I believe on that, because I don't understand why by now everyone don't have a plate with food on their table with the richness of the world. on the planet. So if we don't have it now, and we continue distraction, and we continue to have misunderstandings of what socialism, capitalism is, I think that we are so far away from a solution. However, I do believe that solution lays in smaller communities bringing back things that have to do with sharing, from where these ideas of Marx started. So
do you see that? Do you see that anywhere happening now? The small community sharing going on?
I do.
Where?
I mean, I do. There are small communities, smaller gardens in the States, and at churches that people try to do things in. Well, Europe is a different story because there is more of a sharing in certain countries. So I think that it starts even in neighborhoods, right? Creating elements where you give me your tomatoes and I give you my garlic, and just this in little concepts. But of course, no, we're far away from that in America. I mean, people, even when you say the word socialism, which is already overdue, people get so,
Yeah.
the heads lifted, and it's like, have you actually read the books about this? Because it seems like you have no idea what you're talking about. But however,
Only that it's bad. The only thing they know is socialism is bad.
yeah, but I think that that knowledge comes from a place of ignorance, and not really understanding, not going through the discomfort of trying to understand a system or a process that was different than the one we have there. So and I will finish with this. I was listening to an anthropologist, Argentinian anthropologist today. Her name is Rita Segato, and she was talking to me, rightly so, that in general, the outcome of the process always collapses, and in history has showed us. However, the process itself is what brings the knowledge and the richness, and I think that is one of the biggest things about what happened with Marx and his idea of socialism. You could see it in the kibbutzim in Israel at certain point. Now then, well, there are other Jujus there or here with with health insurance for everyone. That also has its cost, right? Many people don't get good treatments and go into the United States because of the quality of the hospitals there and the science. So nothing is so, as much as no system is perfect. And no, we are far away from that. Going back to your question.
Yeah. Okay, Doug. Food insecurity. Marx's vision of a utopian world where the workers have the means of production and everybody gets to eat. Are we ever going to reach that, or do you think that?
No, I think human nature being what it is, the things we've been talking about, that portion of the population who seeks status and power are always going to be there. And I don't think we'll ever see that, unfortunately. I do think, reflecting on Marx, Marx was pretty much a determinist in these matters. He thought this was an inevitable process, that capitalism would lead to revolution, would lead to the dictatorship of the proletariat. It didn't matter what people did. That was just it was the way it had to go. And I think history has shown that that's not true, that there are choices that are made. And when you look at places like Norway, if you look at the European countries who have various types of systems that are a hybrid of capitalism with a certain amount of a welfare system, historically, most of the European countries that introduced welfare type systems after the Second World War were run by conservative governments. And the conservative governments did that because they were terrified of the rise of communism in Europe. And they basically took the position, if we don't make life a little better and more secure for the average guy, communism is going to have tremendous appeal. So we are going to make it a little better. And they did. And that was not coming out of some grand liberal, socialistic, idealistic position. It was practical politics. Now, they were right. And I think the results are there's some places that are pretty darn nice to live: Norway, Denmark. Uh, but those are relatively small countries,
Yes.
relatively homogenous populations,
Yes.
right? The other key, and I think this is where the United States gets it wrong, if you are going to ask people to pay very high taxes for these kinds of programs, it should not be based on a means test. It should be there for everybody. So if you're in a country where healthcare is free, it's free for the poor person, it's free for the millionaire. Free university education, it's free for everybody.
Right.
What we do in this country is we pit people against one another by saying, okay, if you're below this income level, then we'll do certain things for you. If you're above that income level, no. And that's just psychologically a bad policy, because it makes the people who are paying the bulk of the taxes feel like it's us against them, that they're being exploited. That's how we tend to operate in this country. If you look at those European countries, you look at Denmark, where I think the tax rate is 70%.
Mm-hmm.
But people are happy to pay their taxes,
Right.
because they all get it. They all get it. They have tremendous security, right? And they all feel therefore united in that. We're putting this in for all of us, and we're all getting the payoff. I think that's real key to making those kind of systems work. And we have never figured out how to sell that kind of notion in this country.
True.
And is it because the politicians managed to get themselves elected by positing the us versus them model? And
I think there's a tremendous amount to that, and I think the Democrats have been terrible about that. I mean, they very much do that, right? And I think one of the things that's cost the Democrats, everybody talks about the depletion of the middle class in the United States. There was a very interesting article a few days ago in the New York Times that showed that, yes, the proportion of people in the middle class is shrinking. The main reason is there are more people moving into the upper middle class, not as many moving down. So that when the Democrats keep kind of villainizing the more affluent people, that's becoming the majority people. And they're losing votes. You can't do that if you expect to win. You can't do an us versus them. And I think the Republicans do us versus them in other areas like immigration and stuff. It's always, I think American politics is built on us versus them. And I think it's a very destructive strategy.
Yeah.
And it's, go ahead, Raquel.
No, I think I completely agree with you in everything you've said. I mean, we can't keep it's an outdated concept. Us versus them doesn't work any longer. I mean, is destroying the main great ideas for which the US was built upon. And once again, unfortunately, we can't compare the US society and politics with countries such as Denmark or Norway, because again, it's homogeneous, it's small, and they don't need to look for the scapegoat. But however, if you go to countries like Spain now, or even Portugal, where I have been, right, where I have colleagues, middle class musicians, cultured people, but now when things don't work because in the health for all or education for all, then there is a list, and now they are giving those spaces sometimes for poor immigrants and not for the son or the daughter of the Portuguese person. And those very good, well-educated, middle-class, sensitive people also become like, well, then, these immigrants. So it's very easy to, again, in countries that don't need to find a scapegoat, that are homogeneous and are rich already, it is easier to have all of that. However, I will say one more thing. I do not like when we Americans think I'm going to go and retire over wherever in the world because expats are not welcome and they should not be. Because we
Another anthropological.
we do not adapt to other cultures.
Mhm.
Okay. Another anthropological concept deserving consideration is monotheism. So we're jumping into religion here. And how that belief evolved into major religious organizations: Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. It all started with the story Moses wrote down in the book of Genesis about a sheep herder named Abraham who started hearing voices during his extended periods of solitude. One of those voices told Abram that he needed to prove that he loved the voice he was hearing more than his own son by killing said son, Isaac. Just as Abram was about to provide that proof and stab that little baby, the voice said, "Just kidding. But since you were truly willing to sacrifice your own son just for me, I will make your progeny into a nation of people who are better than all the rest of the people in the world, deserving all the benefits of my infinite power that it can bestow, just because you showed just now that you love me more than your own son." Okay, that's the story that Moses wrote down. What followed was the nation of the Israelites, named after Isaac's son. Then the emergence of Christianity, inspired by the person of Jesus, and the emergence of Islam, inspired by the person of Muhammad, all still adhering to the belief that this single powerful deity likes their religion the best. But was it this belief system that fostered their dominance over the globe these past millennia? I kind of think it had more to do with successful military campaigning, starting with Joshua's conquests of Canaan, through the generals such as Saladin, to our current Secretary of War, Pistol Pete Hegseth. Certainly, strong administrative organizations like the Roman Catholic Church helped keep the flock contained. But without the military power supporting the belief system, do you believe these three dominant examples of monotheistic religions would have had this longevity? So what I'm basically saying, Raquel, is that the military power that wrapped itself around these religions was the reason that they've stayed around all these thousands of years. What do you say to that?
No, I pass the word to Doug first. I need to understand better I don't know. I don't know. I don't really.
Well, okay. Moses led the Jews, the Israelites, out of Egypt, and they spent 40 years in the desert where he wrote these books. And then he was about to die. He said to Joshua, "You got to take this military and you got to conquer this land." And then Joshua went and conquered the land. Okay. Then after Muhammad came along, how many years later? Probably 500-600 years later, he started Islam, but then they had the military power to go ahead and conquer pretty much the Middle East, North Africa, and everything. And they ended up being sustained for many years, many thousands of years, at least, 1,000 anyway. And then, of course, Christianity came along. And then we had, the military might of Charlemagne and all these other generals. So what do you think there, Raquel? You think I might have a little bit of a point here as the reason why they've managed to be surviving so much is because they had such great military success?
Maybe, I mean, they still are organizations made by men, which we are destructive in essence, following a particular idea. So what you're asking,
because they're made by men, and not including women. Is that what you're saying?
Oh no, I'm
Oh,
talking
okay,
about
okay.
humanity. No, no,
All
no.
right.
I'm very pluralistic in my thinking. Not by men as the male dominant no. I'm
Not
not
the
going there.
patriarchy reasoning. Okay.
I'm not going there with my answer. I'm because religions have male, female, and everything in between.
Well, the Jewish religion has more female than the Catholics or Islam.
Well, I mean, it depends. The Jewish Orthodox is pretty much is the man
Female
in the
dominant.
synagogue and the matriarch in the household managing the house. So it's and you don't have that much participation. I mean, a woman. There are only now women rabbis.
Right. Well,
It's
when I worked
relatively
in the prison,
recent.
the Jewish rabbi was a woman. So that
Yeah.
was my first exposure to that.
Right, but it's relatively recent.
Uh-huh.
It's not something that has been. However, well, in Catholicism, you do not still have women priests in the Roman
That's
Church.
true about the Catholics. Absolutely. Yeah.
However, no, because that was not the question. I was listening to. I am not sure if it's just related to the military behind. Perhaps, I mean, there is a huge system behind any organized religion,
Uh-huh.
and we can see now what that is doing in the Middle East.
Right.
Unfortunately, so you have the state. Well, it's complex, but also religions did good as well. For some
Mhm.
for people, it moves the good and the worst. It created Bach without the Christianity, we wouldn't have a Johann Sebastian Bach or
Mhm.
so many artists
Well,
that.
with Islam, with algebra and medicine, Islam, yeah, they were big, yeah.
So,
Architecture. Hmm.
I just think that the complexity of these organizations is that the killing, the killing in the name of the misunderstanding that you have to kill in the name of someone that was everything but death. In every single religion and every single word, you don't see in the Torah that kind of human reaction that you have to kill another in order to coexist. I think that is the main thing to me that I still don't understand about these three organized religions, whichever big power behind military or whatever.
Let me uh, clarify this here. Are you saying that in the Torah it says that you do have to kill?
No,
Oh,
no,
okay, that's right.
no.
Okay.
There is none. There is in none of these three holy books. You will have anything that says that you need to kill your neighbor in order
Hmm.
to exist.
Hmm.
So what we do with that, it's pretty horrific.
Yeah.
But it has nothing to do with the main essence of how they why do they exist and the good that does in the world as well.
Okay. All right, Doug. Raquel set you up for this one.
Yeah. Well, a couple of things. First of all, I would point out that the Torah actually does tell the Israelites to kill off the inhabitants of the land they were given by God if they didn't get out on their own, right? So pretty brutal. But I think I think, Bo, you're fundamentally right that the religion is just kind of a parasite to the military, economic, and cultural power of a country. And I think that uh, these religions have dominated in modern times because they were attached to countries that had military and economic tremendous power. I don't think it was because of the religion. I think it just worked out that way. I mean, the Israelites were never a very powerful military power. They were a third-rate little kingdom in part of the world that had a lot of third-rate little kingdoms, right? I mean, but I think certainly Europe became terribly powerful, and Islam became terribly powerful militarily, and I think they would have done that with or without monotheism. I mean, look how long Hinduism has survived. It's not monotheistic, and
it's not militaristic either. So
well, India has a pretty rugged history if you look into it that way, actually. But look at the Roman Empire that conquered huge swaths of the world for a long period of time, polytheistic religion, right? So I think it has to do more with who has military power, and economic power should not be underestimated in all of that. Yeah. So I think religion always latches on to whoever's in power, and that's true both monotheistic and polytheistic. As far back in human history as you go back to ancient Mesopotamia and ancient Egypt. I mean, the priests and the civilian leaders always were in bed together, right? The priests justified the leaders as being gods. God called them to lead, and the powerful people were very good to the priests and made them very wealthy. And that's been the story of human history. And I think that's true whether you're polytheistic, monotheistic. I think religion always, gets in bed with the powerful immediately, given a chance. I mean, look at Christianity. It was a lovely religion until Constantine came along. And as soon as they had the chance to team up with the power, they did, and it's never been the same.
And that's where the power got corrupted.
That's right. And Christianity's never been the same, right?
Yeah.
After that, it took on that brutality, There were more Christian martyrs to other Christian groups after Constantine than there ever was Christian martyrs in the history of the pagan Roman Empire. Christians were much better.
Good story was Hypatia in Egypt. She was martyred because the bishop didn't like her.
Exactly.
She was so powerful or so popular.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Good example.
So I think that's kind of what happens, and I think the religion, whatever the religion is, it will piggyback on to a powerful, militarily or economically powerful government.
Okay. So this dovetails pretty much into our next question. When we're examining the belief system of monotheism and its control over social order, much of the world's population, should we see the consciousness of the true believers as needing to have an all-powerful good in their lives in order to keep hope alive that the bad we see all around us can't possibly triumph? I look at my mother, who was just so frightened that, the bad was going to take over, and that she was just like, would burn candles at night whenever we were out partying, with our buddies drinking beer, because she was just afraid that we were all going to end up in hell. That she needed that belief that God and the Virgin Mary was going to, help keep her kids out of hell. And so is that another thing that had to infiltrate the consciousness of these true believers? Doug, you think that was sort of the case?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is a desire for that kind of security, that kind of guarantee. I mean, everybody would like to have. Life is precarious, and if you look at it with clear eyes, it's very precarious. And I think religion is. I think it's an extension. I think it's the replacement of our fantasies of our all-powerful parents with an all-powerful God. Little kids are the most vulnerable creatures, but they don't usually feel vulnerable if they have good, loving parents, because the parents create the illusion that they can keep that child safe and protected and fine and happy and so forth. And it's only gradually that as children grow up, they realize, hey, mom and dad are not exactly all powerful. Maybe they can't always protect me. Bad things can happen to me. But little kids don't get that unless they have bad parents. That's another story altogether. But I think then when people become adults, they miss that powerful guarantor of their well-being. So along comes God. And I think it works very effectively to give them that sense that it's all going to turn out fine for them and the people they love. Not necessarily for everybody else. I mean, that's the other interesting thing about it, that religion also likes to think, want to make sure you and your loved ones go to heaven, but, not everybody's going to go there, and that's just fine, thank you, as long as it's not me. The early church fathers, I think Tertullian was one of them, who wrote that one of the joys of being in heaven for all eternity is sitting up there looking down, watching the people in hell suffer. So much for Christian virtues.
Okay, Raquel, we need God, because if we don't have God keeping things good, then the bad is going to make everything bad and miserable.
Well, I think that is a very simplistic way of understanding this concept myself. And I do believe, as Doug said, that from the beginning of times we had Greek mythology before, so we it's very hard for a human to understand the vulnerability of life and the mysteries that lie ahead every day, and how to understand the death of a child, or the horrors of a war. So to look for something that keeps us safe, it has been important, and I think the essence of religion. Now, unfortunately, that is, once again, citing Etty, she says, God, if you cannot help me, let me help you. So I believe that there are many misunderstandings of what God is. God, we keep many religions going to this being or bearded man that will come and save us, as you, Doug, said, save my family, but I don't care about others. But I think that the concept of God, if it exists, or if it does that name, has so much more complex or more simple thing, right? There is something that is larger than ourselves, and to understand that, we put a name to it, and we keep each other a warm heart. But I do believe I believe that going, there is a sense of someone kneeling inside one's soul, and I feel that is a presence for me, and that helps me to go through my things. If it's a conversation with myself, or it's God, or when I see an ocean, I see something that is beyond all humanity, all what humanity can make. That's on me, but or on God. But I do think that we have a very egotistic understanding of what God is, and unfortunately, it has made us do the most horrific things on earth to one another.
Hey, I want to ask you about something you just said about what Eddie had said. If God, if you can't help me, let me help you.
Yeah.
Is that what you just said?
Yeah.
What did that mean to you when you heard that? What kind of help was she giving him, or giving?
I think it's not about putting yourself above. It's understanding that there is not such thing that will come and save a community of people if each of us, we don't see each other as the same human beings. So is that understanding that it's not out there. There is not a God that will come as a savior of something. Like my mother used to say, I grew up in Argentina. We were the only Jewish family in a very Catholic neighborhood. It was amazing. And she said, we are not special. We're not different than others. If there is a God, there is one, and it's for all. It makes no sense that we feel different and more special than other people. So I think that is a little bit of a synthesis of Etty, right? This is too much. This hatred and this destruction is too much even for you. How can you come and help others? Once again, because she understood a concept of God that is not out there. Hey, come help me. Come give me. Can I win the lottery at the end of the month? Has nothing to do with that. I think that God, it's really for her a sense of profound love and a light that she was capable and see from one another. And that is what lies, because you're willing to give your own life for that stranger.
So the help that she was given God was the work that she was doing in the
Exactly.
community.
Mm-hmm.
Got it. Got it. Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. Friedrich Nietzsche may be the most misunderstood of all the major philosophers. He was unfairly connected to Hitler and Nazism because after he died, his sister aligned herself and his legacy to the Nazis. My limited understanding, and Doug, you have way more understanding about him than me, is that he promoted the proposition that all past philosophies, all current philosophies, including his own, and all future philosophical assertions are simply bullshit. And anyone making the claim that their way is the path to the truth must be viewed with suspicion and skepticism. Given the propaganda heavy nature of today's political messaging, I think that Nietzsche had made a point worth considering. Did he? Doug, I'm going to let you go first on this one. So you can
Yeah,
go ahead
I
and
think he
correct
had a
everything I
very
said.
much. I think he very much had a point worth considering, and Nietzsche's position was not that there isn't such a thing as truth, but the truth always is defined from a perspective, and that Nietzsche's view was my truth is not necessarily your truth,
Mm-hmm.
and my way to live life is not necessarily your way to live life.
Mm-hmm.
And he was a great enemy of the herd. You know, he was opposed to all forms of nationalism. He thought it was the great curse of Europe, uh, and that people submitted themselves to the group, to the herd, to the popular way of being. And you know, his position was that the herd represented a kind of basically a dictatorship of the weak and powerless over everybody else. Everybody has to be cut down to size. But it's important to remember that for Nietzsche, power and all of this was not dominating other people. It was fulfilling oneself. It was a self domination. You know, it was almost an artistic. You know, Nietzsche was very much an artist at heart. I mean, his aesthetic sensibilities dominated, and he viewed morality as essentially an aesthetic activity. You know, his first great work was on Greek tragedy. You know, this was his. You know, he was not a philosopher by training; he was a philologist. He studied the classics, and that came through his view. And I think there's a lot to that. I think that we have become so focused on sort of public measures of happiness and success and prosperity. And we've kind of forgotten that you need a certain basic amount, or you're not can't do much else. You got to be able to eat. You got to have your basic needs met. But after that, one's fulfillment has less to do with having more money, having more affluence. It has to do with your own values and your own fulfillment, and finding within yourself what's going to be your values. And they may be quite different than the larger culture's values, and that's a-okay. So I think there's a very important message in that. And I think that, as you pointed out, I think Nietzsche's been terribly misunderstood, largely due to his sister's efforts to align him with the Nazis, which was not at all. He was extremely not that way. But I think in truth, I mean, it's a marvelous, you know, and even in pursuing his thing, you know, his allegory of Zarathustra. I mean, his whole point in there is, you know, you can't be my disciple, because if you're my disciple, you're not following yourself. And therefore, you're not following what I'm telling you to do, basically. I should have no disciples. Find your own way.
By the way, I tried to find that play I wrote about Nietzsche's last
yeah.
class, and it's in a flash drive somehow, and I got access. If
Yeah,
I
if you ever
find it, I'll
find it, I'd
send
love
it
to
to
see
you.
it.
If I find it, I'll send it to you. I do have hard copy, but maybe.
Yeah.
Okay, Raquel, Doug brought out a very good point about the perception of the truth. Your truth may be true for you. My truth may be true for me. That doesn't negate anybody's truth, even if they're different. So your truth, I think, comes out from a lot from what you've learned from Eddie, and then other things that you've learned through your exploration of the arts and yourself and all that. So what do you say about that?
That's true. Speaking. Yeah, I agree with I think that to try to find, I would say that the answer for me is to be as plural as possible.
Mm-hmm.
But there is something that fascinates me, which is finding, finding the truth when we play characters. But what that means, because we are lying. When I'm going on the stage, I am not me. I am not saying my words, and I'm trying to be someone else. But actually, I'm not. I am being me through my own understanding of the character. So it's a fascinating and a complex thing to actually put into actual words, because indeed, what is truth but a particular essential and meaningful understanding of what you are seeing in the world, and bring it out there through the scope of your eyes and your own history and story. But going to something that you, Doug, said, I think that right now we're again so polarized. In one way, we think that we all own a truth. We all want to be liked by what we say, and also our truths are misunderstood and misconstructed. So, for instance, if someone says, I have a family that live in Jerusalem, and they are very much affected by what happened on October 7th, someone might say, oh, then you are against Gaza. So there is such a misconstruction of concepts, and it's like, well, no, that is not what I mean. This is not what I'm meaning, and all of it's that is not the truth I am trying to bring out. So
It's hard. It's hard
it is very
because of
hard,
that
and
polarized nature.
I don't think that I think that in order to understand what truth means, we also have to be humble enough not to believe that we carry it and that there is only one way. I think that more open we are to see other ways of seeing life and lives, and to understand that life lays in grace, then perhaps we're closer to the understanding of what truth is, which to me is a understanding from a very deep essence of something non-violent, actually. Right? Because if my truth is like, I'm gonna go and kill all of you guys because of this truth, then something is also misconstructed there.
But whenever you have your character, that your character is you, and the interpretation of the character that the author had written with the dialogue that you are speaking, there's also a truth that emerges
Absolutely.
from that interpretation as well. So it's not only you as a person as your own truth, but you as an actor coming up with the truth of the character. That's also truth as well.
Yeah, but I think that when we perceive it as truthful as an audience member is when there has been a lot of empathy from the actor to the character being played, and also when it comes from a place that it's in which your entire being is invested.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So there is something as minimalist as you wish to be in your acting. Right? Recently, I saw Ray Fiennes in London, and it's like a master class on acting and understanding what to be truthful is. It's not about being like exaggerating anything, but it's about finding that connection to something so deeply rooted in who you are that you're able to do the opposite journey to bring that out from yourself. So there is such an empathy between you and the character, and your heart and your viscera just there to the service of it. So basically is that we become to the service of something larger than oneself.
And the audience sees that when they see the honesty
Yeah,
of the portrayal.
absolutely.
After the violent upheaval that engulfed Europe when the Protestant Reformation challenged the corrupt power structure of the Roman Catholic establishment, there emerged a period of intellectual and scientific curiosity that came to be known as the Enlightenment, which featured such prominent figures as Locke, Voltaire, I think you already mentioned Hobbes and you, Doug, and our own Ben Franklin. But the most influential thinker that later emerged was a British scientist and outstanding writer, Charles Darwin, whose explanation on the development of life on this planet was based on detailed observations, comprehensively documented, and resulted in the biggest triumph for scientific reasoning, in my mind, ever. Even so, there was significant blowback by established religious authorities because believing in Darwin's theory meant that most of the early chapters in the book of Genesis were flat out wrong. Unfortunately, that battle continues to this day in many school districts across the country in the form of evolution versus creationism. How do you see that conflict as it sits today? And where do you see it ending up in the future? Raquel, can you tell us how you think about this evolution and creationism battle right now? That's just playing out?
I believe it is so sad what is happening in America right now, because once again it's not about the knowledge versus no knowledge. It's I think it's worse than that. When you start in a country that speaks freedom, you start in a deliberate way saying like your kids can read this versus that. It's not even the content any longer, because anyone can go to the internet and check out the knowledge, but it's just the concept of shortening the possibilities of knowledge to children for the sake of power. For the sake of what exactly? And it's also so contradictory to, so that all the people, the people that are doing these vile things in the education over there in the schools are people that are well versed and went to good universities, some of them. So it's, to me, is unthinkable that there is this, that in the 21st century we are talking about this. To me is absolutely nonsensical. It makes no sense or whatsoever.
So you said this in America. So in Europe, this isn't a problem as much in Europe as it is in America.
It's not as much in the news as in America. You don't see people like taking books out of out of the schools because you consider that here the people. So there are Catholic countries, but we don't have the Christians radicals as we have them there. That unfortunately poorly read the scriptures. and have a beautiful misconstructed understanding of what or who Jesus was, or that versus science, which has nothing to do. It's like talking like potatoes and bananas. There is such an ignorant way of corrupting the educational system. Here, no, I don't see that at all.
Okay. That's pretty sad. I believe you. All right, Doug.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's very much the case. That I think there's always been that kind of fundamentalist view among certain people in America, but they were largely kept out of influencing our public educational system. And I think what's changed is that group of politicians who have decided that they could rally that group to support them by legitimizing these crazy views. And so all of a sudden it's become, they have power. They have power where they shouldn't have power. So from a political point of view, I think that's what has changed. I think those people were always there. But I think they were very much marginalized in this country. But I would want to say one more thing about Darwin, that Darwin isn't a problem for religion just because of Genesis and the literal interpretation of Scripture. The rational theologians of the Enlightenment, their primary argument about the existence of a God was the argument from design. The argument that when you look at the complexity, the way the whole universe works, the way animal bodies work, the way everything works, it couldn't have just happened by chance. It had to be the product of a very intelligent force that allowed that to happen, right? What Darwin did, I mean, he didn't prove that wasn't true. What he showed, however, was that there actually was a perfectly logical mechanism that could allow all of this to appear without a God. So that whole argument from design as proof of God's existence demolished. And that, I think, is another big factor in, particularly in the early years, the resistance to Darwin by even the non-fundamentalist Christians. It flew in the face of their what they thought was their best argument for the existence of a God, the argument from design. And he just said, no, there's a perfectly good, understandable mechanism how this could all come about by blind chance without an intelligence behind it. So it's possible that could happen. So it's not an argument for or against the existence of God that the world is the way it is. And in fact, what evolution would predict, that the world would become very complex, but flawed. And that's what you see. I mean, you take the human body. If there's an all-knowing, all-powerful God, there are numerous design flaws in the human body that are hard to explain, right? I mean, if God was thinking, he would not have made the prostate a circle that goes around your urethra so that when you get old, you can't pee, right? If God was thinking, he would have put, in your back, he would have put, like you have in your legs for the veins, so that you didn't have all the back pressure that causes hemorrhoids, right? You wouldn't have that. I mean, there are numerous design problems, but they're all easily explained by evolution. If you're walking, you don't need valves in your back veins if you're walking on all fours, because there's no big pressure, right? And examples go on if you study human anatomy. So I think evolution actually does a better job explaining the world as it is than the argument from design. So I think it's a very fundamental attack on what was traditionally viewed as the strongest argument in favor of there has to be a God.
So where are we now, you think, with that?
Well, I think it all depends on where things go politically in this country. I think for the foreseeable future, unfortunately, I think these forces are going to have considerable influence. I think it's going to be very hard to rein it in again. It's going to take a long time, even if Trump and his people fall out of power. But so I think we're in for a kind of intellectually retrograde time when it comes to this sort of thing. Sadly,
not very hopeful.
Not very hopeful in this country.
Okay. As an adjunct math professor in Alaska, I never failed to tell my algebra students that another name for the coordinate graph with the XY axes is the Cartesian plane, named after its mathematician inventor, Rene Descartes. Included in that disclosure was the added feature that Descartes was also a philosopher who said that our senses couldn't be trusted and all we see, hear, smell, or touch could be illusions. But there was one thing we know for sure exists: ourself. He used the Latin phrase cogito ergo sum, I think, therefore I am. There has to be something doing the thinking, so that something has to exist. He also said that if you really want to seek the truth, you have to be willing to doubt everything as much as possible. Could it be, Doug, that the biggest failure in America today is the unwillingness to doubt that our nation is great and always does the right thing? This belief in Trump and the unwillingness to believe he can do anything wrong just seems to be a cancer that is gnawing away at our moral fiber.
Yeah, I mean, I think I think you're absolutely right that it is one of the biggest problems. That whole myth of American exceptionalism, which has been around for a long, long time, and it's kind of on steroids now with the Trumpians, that our country is the best, is great, that what we do is always virtuous and just, and the rest of the world isn't. Yeah, I think it's an absolutely terrible and very destructive viewpoint, and we're not. And I think part of it too, you know, I remember back when the Soviet Union fell, and the people drew the conclusion that they were gone, we were the superpower now. And I think that was the wrong message. The message really was the world has gotten complex enough that there isn't going to be a single superpower. They just happen to go first. And I think we will follow them soon enough. The world is too complicated. There are too many other powerful countries and forces. I think the notion that there's going to be this superpower that's always right and always in charge and sets the tone. Just
that was kind of a naive hope on your part, though, because Reagan was president at the time, and GW, and they were just like, you know, alphas, males on steroids.
Absolutely, yeah, and you know, and they not only felt we were the biggest and the most powerful and the strongest, but we were the most virtuous. You know, it was all tied to that. And again, I think that's total illusion. Now, I will point out, since you used Descartes to introduce the question, Descartes did set out systematically to do a methodical doubt of everything. However, his declared purpose in doubting everything was to ultimately find total certainty in everything. And he thought he did.
But he didn't.
He didn't, because he made assumptions all the way along,
exactly.
Of all sorts. Even the cogito. As both David Hume and Friedrich Nietzsche pointed out, there is no reason to assume that because thinking is going on, that there is something there that's doing the thinking. There could just be thinking in the world. Why do you want to make a subject? Why do you assume there's a subject? There's no evidence for that. It might be the case, but that's not a given. That is not a self-evident truth.
I'm not sure I can go along with that, because, you know, you might say that, but I'm kind of thinking there has to be some kind of vessel that is doing the thinking, especially if that thinking is me doing the thinking.
But what's the me? You're making an assumption about me. That you know, you can introspect all you want, and you'll never see a me. You will see a series of thoughts and impressions and sensations and ideas flowing along. The notion that there is a substance underlying it might be true, but that's an assumption. There's absolutely no certainty in that.
Another thing that Descartes tried to do, as while he was making all these assumptions, was to prove the existence of God.
Oh,
and he,
yes.
and he wanted to do that to stay in the good graces of the.
Actually, Descartes felt he had to prove the existence of God before he could prove the existence of the world.
Mm-hmm.
Because he could never guarantee there's an outside world, even our own bodies. So he had to prove there was a God, and then he had to prove that God would not deceive us. And so our impressions that there's a world have to be true. I mean, that's how he did it. Really very stretching.
Oh, he stretched it the whole way.
But his point at the end, he felt he had absolutely established certainty.
Mm-hmm.
And so in a sense, he's an object lesson. Don't do that.
Yeah.
There's no certainty.
Okay, Raquel, I'm gonna narrow this down to you this way. Descartes preached that we had to doubt everything. So in your mind, the fact that we can doubt is really a good process, part of the process that we need to keep in play all the time, right?
Yeah, I think to ask questions is something that keep us humble and understanding more, in essence, more elements of existence. However, I do believe that we cannot just ask questions for asking questions, that we have to be in touch with certain sensibility when we do it. And
do you mean we have to have a goal in mind when we're asking these questions, that they have to be leading us into some?
No, I'm not asking. I'm not saying that we have to be like that there is a suffering, behind it, but there has to be a little bit of poetry
Mm-hmm.
beyond just the bare thinking of a mathematical thinking, or perhaps there is a poetic way of seeing them mathematically as well.
Okay.
But I do believe that at least the world I would like to see, and I think in that regard, sometimes after 20 years of living in that beautiful country that is North America, it lacks asking questions towards itself and its own belly button, and it stops being interested in what the rest of the world in which it has so much impact thinks and does. So yeah, I believe that constant. Also, I come from a family of scientists, so this constant. Okay, so what can we do next to be better, and
Mm-hmm.
what can we do? So if the question is to also come back to us and say, what can we do with this particular problem for us to be better with that topic? Perhaps we could have a little bit more of hope.
Okay. So we're basically trying to ask the questions in a nuanced way in order to work on becoming better.
I think so. I think so.
Okay.
I mean, which is pretty much, I think, the work of any good philosopher in history, right? It was, or the ones that we keep thinking. I think that there is much more to the just thought or the phrase, right? There are, again, so many layers underneath the meaning of the phrases that left us. That's why they are such a classics to us, and we continue to investigate, like the good writers throughout history.
Mm-hmm.
Because there is something more underneath that is also what did it really mean,
So that should be part of the investigation into trying to find out what they really meant.
I mean, Yeah, or what else is there? Or even bringing like, well, or bring the antithesis to the table.
Hmm. Yeah.
But which is what also they did with the previous philosopher before them, right? It's like,
Hmm.
okay,
Right.
so
Right.
and so said this. Well, no, but I don't see this. I see this here. Um, so yeah, but I do believe that we have to continue to ask questions, like especially now that we are backwards wherever we go. What
Right.
have we done so poorly that this bomb is there and that bomb is there and the books are being taken care of, taken away from the schools, and that we're so not we are no longer trustworthy. We don't trust anything or anyone either. Yeah, we're living in such a world. It's complex.
Well, after January 6th, the
Mm.
guy who started that, 4 years later, getting elected president by a majority of the voters, we are certainly not trustworthy if
That's
we
right.
we can do that. Okay, Raquel, a favorite philosopher. I have a feeling that you're going to go with Eddie, but if not, because you actually did so much work, and she's so profound in her writings and what you discovered. But is that your favorite philosopher? Is that somebody you
I
would
mean,
like to
she's
mention?
not a philosopher as such, right? She wouldn't call herself a philosopher ever. However,
She
her
wrote a diary. She basically wrote a diary, right?
but she did the work of a philosopher in terms of the profound observation of the human being,
Mm-hmm.
in times of horror. Because one thing is just to sit here in the comfort of Cuenca and look out and think, and another thing is to think when people were being killed in front of you and still being able to write and to give us and to continue to ask herself how to be better. There is so yes, she is my main lighthouse. But there is a relatively young South Korean philosopher, Byung-Chul Han, that I enjoy reading, because he also talks about how important is for us to. He lives in Germany, but how important is for us to stop and contemplate a little bit more, to be able to observe in depth and not just being like like a windmills, trying to understand everything that happens, and being in this world of the mobiles, and answering and doing and multitasking and never stopping, and the kids with iPads, and so I like his perspective in calming down and observing life differently. I love him very much.
So he's kind of like saying, slow down,
So,
smell the flowers a little bit, and
and
come to your
try to
conclusions that way.
exactly,
Yeah.
yeah. So Byung-Chul Han is a good one for me to go.
Okay. Doug, who do you like as a favorite?
Uh, Sort of my philosophical hero is David Hume. And I like him for a number of reasons. For one, he was not a professional philosopher,
Mm.
although he wrote extensively philosophy. He was known in his own time as a historian. He was a diplomat. He was a man of the world. And he always grounded his thinking in real life considerations, and that you had to do that. He also sounded to me like the most fun philosopher. If I had to go to dinner with somebody philosophically, it would be David Hume. He loved to eat, drink, and be merry. But he also was a skeptic. So you talk about doubt. I mean, he was the first one to say, you should question everything. And usually you're not going to come up with an answer. There is no certainty, and that's fine. You can figure that out. But he also felt that ultimately we have to ground our philosophy in human nature, what we are, how we are. And if you lose touch with that, your philosophy just becomes some abstract bullshit. And one of his writings, he said, it's fine to be a philosopher, but first be a man. And I think that kind of summarizes the way I look at how one should approach philosophy.
I love it.
All right.
I love it.
Raquel, Doug, this is something I've wanted to do for a long time, get into this kind of conversation, and you two really helped out with that. So thank you so much, both of you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
All right. Appreciate it. And all you out there in Cyberland, I hope you have some more philosophical grounding in your human nature and your quest for perfection. Until next time, see you then. Bye now.
Alors je sens dans moi